We begin tonight here with some breaking news. Good evening, I'm Richard French. We show you now a live look at the headquarters of YouTube in San Bruno, California. We show you this because there is a massive police presence responding to a shooting there. The suspect, female, now pronounced dead. Apparently, she took her own life. 4 people have been transported to a local hospital, 1 in critical condition. We do not know whether there are at this point any fatalities. Police say this is still an active scene, even though the shooter is dead. We will continue to follow this for you and update you as more information comes in. All right. Unfortunately, another mass shooting in America. But we now switch gears here and we head to Washington. And I ask you if you remember this.
We are going to Washington, D.C., and we are going to drain the swamp. I see this young boy here, and he's screaming, "Drain the swamp." He's this big. How cute.
A Trump administration will end government corruption.
We have begun to drain the swamp of government corruption.
Okay, so to be clear, the swamp is not being drained. Washington is instead more like this. Hey, anytime you can work the Black Lagoon into a show, you're doing okay. Well, that guy will probably be the next communications director, even though I don't think he speaks. I kid. It is becoming so bad here. New York Magazine calls the administration 501 days in swampland. I want to read a portion of the piece. Quote, "More than at any time in history, the President of the United States actively using the power and prestige of his office to line his own pockets. Landing loans for his businesses, steering wealthy buyers to his condos, securing cheap foreign labor for his resorts, preserving federal subsidies for his housing projects, easing regulations on his golf courses, licensing his name to overseas projects, even peddling coffee mugs and shot glasses bearing the presidential seal. For Trump, whose business revolves around the marketability of his name, there has proved to be no public policy too big and no private opportunity too crass to exploit for personal profit." And you need to trust me when I tell you I could use the entirety of this hour if I chose here to go about all the various examples, big and small, about how he's basically profited from his position. But instead, we picked out some examples that are particularly flagrant and, at least to me and I think to many of you, more than a little troublesome. Let's start at Trump Tower. The Trump Organization is raking in tens of millions of dollars that are questionable, to put it politely. China's government-controlled bank is the largest tenant in Trump Tower. It's paying $2 million a year in rent, and it sits just a few floors before Trump's own office. Plus, the Pentagon pays about $1.6 million in rent at the tower. Also, the RNC reportedly shelling out another $37,000 a month for rent. And that's not all. At least 36 tenants have either relationships with the government, are lobbyists or federal contractors, or they have regulatory targets. And things are even dicier at the Trump International Hotel right on Pennsylvania Avenue in D.C. Right after the president won, the room rate spiked by a third there. It's now $650 a night, highest, by the way, in the area. And the property reportedly earned $2 million in profits during its first 3 months in office. It is filled with foreign leaders, defense contractors, corporate CEOs, lobbyists, basically anybody who wants access to the president. And by the way, reportedly, it's working. If you get a room there or suites or a block of rooms, the chances of you getting an audience with the commander-in-chief go up exponentially. And then we go down south to Mar-a-Lago. The initiation fee suddenly doubled to $200,000 right after Trump won. In return, club members get access to the president and could even get to rub elbows with foreign leaders. Then there's the golf. Remember this?
If you become president and you go to the White House, why would you want to leave the White House?
When you're in the White House, who the hell wants to play golf?
Who wants to leave the White House? How the hell do you leave for 3 weeks to play golf?
If I get elected president, I'm going to be in the White House a lot. I'm not leaving. I'm going to be working for you. I'm not going to have time to go play golf.
Everything you just heard is not true, and it's not even fair to call it hypocrisy. Now that he is president, he rarely spends a weekend at that same White House, and he has played more golf than Tiger Woods. Plus, it appears his companies are making a buck while he's hitting the links. Get this, and to me this is as obscene as anything. The Secret Service spent $150 grand on golf cart rentals in the first 10 months of the Trump administration. And guess where the majority of the money went? You guessed it, Trump's own golf courses. Now, the rest of the first family, not exactly squeaky clean. First son-in-law, Jared Kushner, the focus of White House ethics probe, plus he's in the sights of Bob Mueller's investigation. As a senior advisor while he's not solving Middle East peace, Kushner meets up with a lot of important people, even though his security clearance has now been downgraded, but that has not stopped his wheeling and dealing, including, most notably, the nearly $500 million in loans the family real estate business was able to secure right after the lenders just so happened to meet with Kushner at the White House. That includes Apollo Global Management, lending $185 million, by the way, the founder of Apollo, an outside Trump advisor. Citigroup, they lent the Kushner companies more than $300 million, that after a trip to D.C. Then there's Jared's wife, I'm sure you've heard of her, Ivanka. Not afraid to try and cash in on the new level of fame. Right after she delivered a speech at the Republican convention, she marketed and sold the dress she was wearing, $160 a pop, and magically sold out. Ivanka did the same thing with the bracelet she wore during the 60 Minutes interview that was marketed and went on sale for $11 grand. Sales pitch included a pic of her wearing it during said interview. And it's just the first family on touching on things get a lot swampier when you take a look at the cabinet. HUD Secretary Ben Carson and that $31,000 dinette set. Mr. Reisman will tell us all about it, having it in his dining room. That would be the HUD Secretary, Mr. Carson, blamed the whole debacle on his wife, then said they needed a new table because the old one was dangerous, dangerous dinette sets. The government wound up canceling said order. I hope if the Carsons are still using the table, they are staying safe. Now, don't forget about the EPA head, Scott Pruitt. He could be the next to go. That is, if he wasn't blowing sunshine at the president. A lot of reports say the president getting tired of his act. Other reports saying he got a call last night saying stay with the fight. Why this is going on? It could be because the EPA secretary loves to fly first class on you and me, the taxpayers' dime, to the tune of more than $100 grand so far. Trump said he does it due to security threats. Then there's the shady condo deal. Pruitt, he got a way below market value rent deal from the wife of, oh, by the way, a top energy lobbyist who had business with the EPA. He spent just $50 a night to rent his bedroom near the Capitol, 1/3, and that's putting it generously, of the same cost of rents in said neighborhood. Pruitt, he then took an overseas speaking gig on behalf of the natural gas company, the same industry that the lobbyist represents. Over at Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, wife, they made their share of headlines, went to Fort Knox in Kentucky to watch the eclipse, then flew in a government plane on the way back. Mnuchin said he'd reimburse the government for his wife's expenses. That would be former actress Louise Linton. Mnuchin also wanted to use a government jet for his honeymoon in Europe. That would have cost us, the taxpayers, $25 grand an hour. Mnuchin said he needed the plane due to its secure communications equipment. Request was denied after it made public news, and that sparked an inquiry by the Inspector General's office. Ryan Zinke, an Interior, he's also got expensive tastes. His office getting 3 sets of doors upgraded. The price tag, $139,000. Pretty fancy doors. Zinke says he didn't know they were being ordered. He also likes private jets, it seems, private helicopters, including a $13,000 flight from Vegas to his Montana home. Also took a government chopper from Virginia to D.C. The reason? To ride horses with Mike Pence. And you paid for it. Let's get into our panel right now. Phil Reisman, I kid before, but he is a radio host on WVOX and a columnist who wrote for the Journal News for more than 30 years, now with Westchester Magazine, among others. Joe Pinion, he a Republican strategist and GOP candidate for the New York State Assembly. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
It's good to see you around in the creature suit, by the way.
Exactly. You have done countless columns over the years about lawmakers, primarily local or state lawmakers, trying to get one over the public here, trying to get free meals, free tickets, or something else. Listen, I'm not naive to this, but I actually believe, especially if you're going to be president, you're trying to be a public servant. You're not trying to make money off the deal, especially when the whole premise of your campaign, other than the wall Mexico was building, was that you were going to drain the swamp and get all these special interests out of it. Right. It really offends the sensibilities, and I don't know how I could be shocked, but I actually am at how bad it is.
And just look at this, Richard. 3 more years in this term. This is just
You're being optimistic, but go ahead.
Well, there you go. Well, yeah, assuming all things work out in his favor. But yeah, I mean, the list is just mind-boggling. And as somebody in the Atlantic magazine said a couple of months ago, it's hard to get your brain around it. I mean, and think of this, he still hasn't released his tax returns.
Nope.
So, you know, and you left out some of the other, I mean, there's so much. You couldn't even get
trust me, I did a fraction of them.
I know.
You know where I could have gone on this, right?
Kushner's sister is being investigated for a deal that she was trying to broker with the Chinese in New Jersey to build these towers over there.
And I didn't even do the numbskull sons, Donnie and Eric, with all the foreign investments they're trying to do.
And the lobbyists that, you know, have ties to him, including Corey Lewandowski.
Yep.
I mean, it just goes on and on.
It's almost, the way that Trump has figured out to profit from his position, it's almost ingenious in a like Lex Luthor kind of way. Like the fact that he's able to have the government, have foreign governments, have the Secret Service, have the Republican Party, have his donors to his campaign, because his campaign offices are in Trump Tower, reimbursing him personally. If it wasn't so abhorrent, it would be almost brilliant in its evil design.
That implies that there's some subtlety involved. Nobody in their right mind, Joe, of any political party. Do you imagine, let's go on the Republican side, 43 or 41 are Reagan, renting a building, forcing the RNC to put their headquarters in it, forcing the Secret Service to pay him top dollar rent to protect him, and then to rent his golf carts to protect him as he plays more golf, honestly, than Barack Obama played basically in his whole first term. To me, I understand where Andrew's going on it, but the reason somebody did is no one would think to be so tacky.
You know, I've said before that I think that for better and for worse, President Trump is impervious to shame. I think that, and that on some basic level, for a negotiation standpoint, might work in his favor. But for the purposes of the American taxpayer right now, I think it's apparent that in many ways we're getting hosed. Having said that, I think that when people heard Donald Trump say drain the swamp, I think that maybe the media and maybe people on the left didn't necessarily understand what that meant to the Republican voter base. Right. I think that there is something inherent in people in America, particularly in the heartland of America, who just assume that people have been wasting their money for years. Decade upon decade, Democrats and Republicans alike. And so I think with President Trump...
So was he trying to prove that he could do it too?
Well, no, I think that if you look at it from a standpoint of if the swamp is Hillary land, if the swamp is all these people on the left who have been wasting their money for absolutely no good reason, that if there is going to be someone that wastes their money, let it at least be somebody who seems to have their best interest at heart.
You're probably right, but here's my question. Right. If I'm in a red state, I'm sitting in Nebraska, and then I turn on the news, okay? And I see Mnuchin and his annoying wife with a Twitter habit or whatever, a Facebook page, flying on my tax dollar so that they can wear the dopey glasses to stare at the eclipse here. And they're flying on government planes here and everything else. Aren't I as mad at that as I am about any other government waste? Some Wall Street guy doing that with my money?
The problem is that when you have the strong man or this great man theory of government, right, which is basically what President Trump and people who support him have subscribed to, you end up in a scenario that people end up arriving to the conclusion, if these are the people that he needs to be successful around him, if I have placed my trust in his hands and these are the individuals who he believes are going to allow the economy to go stronger, are going to allow the plant to go and start making iPhones here in America, when you start talking about that type of messaging, irrespective of the fact that we can sit here and have a conversation in minutia and in detail about how these things are not in the long-term best interest of American sustainability, it becomes very difficult, borderline impossible, to try to explain to somebody living in these places to have that conversation.
You definitely are more right right than I am, but here's my point. I'm not expecting the public to follow the PFIL with which shell companies were set up to basically have tax shelters or whatever else. I'm talking about a guy who plays golf every single weekend, has not worked a 5-day work week, and he's charging the public to have people protect him at his own resorts and making money off it. That ain't complicated.
Yeah, well, at least he hasn't rented out the Lincoln bedroom yet. But we'll see. But
he has to stay there long enough.
Right.
You know?
But I think But I think Joe's onto something here. I think what he is to the people that like him and are fans of Donald Trump, the swamp is something else. It's not the chiseling and the corruption and that kind of thing. It's the institutions that he has, made a point of frankly undermining, and that includes things like, and sometimes they're worthy of a lot of criticism, but it's everything from, just the basic democratic small d institutions, which people think is the bigger corrupting force in the country now. And that includes everything from the media to even NATO.
Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, Andrew, the media aspect of this, and how there's different sets of rules and how facts have taken a complete backseat and all the rest. But to me, whatever my criticisms could have been about certain presidents, I never thought presidents took the job as a way for personal enrichment. Now, when you get out of office, if you can make $5 million, bucks doing a speech in Japan, if you're Ronald Reagan, God bless you. And every president, regardless of whatever politics, writes the book here, does the speaking tours and all the rest, and they'll make money. And you know what? I've had no problem with that. But he didn't even let the inauguration pass before he was trying to figure out how rules didn't apply to him. We still don't know, to Phil's point, we haven't seen the tax returns, so we don't know even what policies he's doing to benefit him. He never created a separate trust here with the family business and himself. I don't know. I just find this so not only un-American, but so against American self-interest.
I agree with you, and unfortunately, this is Donald Trump's nature. This is what he's been doing his entire career, even before he was president. To me, the indictment isn't so much Trump and his cabinet, although they're certainly, not formally, but indictable in the setup that you laid out. To me, this smacks of an indictment of the Republican majorities in Congress, in the House and the Senate, because they have abdicated their oversight responsibilities. They have abdicated making sure that they have full financial disclosure. They haven't checked. They could privately check his tax returns looking for conflicts, and they haven't done that yet.
Do you imagine, Joe, to Andrew's point that he raises, do you imagine if Obama did this? Do you imagine if Obama didn't give up his returns? Hold on a second. Do you imagine if in his cabinet he filled it replete with people with no experience in those cabinets and have actively said they wanted to shut down the very cabinets that were going to run and have been making money off of it? Do you imagine if Pruitt worked for Obama and the guy was leveraging people who wanted government contracts with getting basically crash pads out of it? I mean, come on.
I think, again, on some basic level, I've said it before, Donald Trump is just once in a generational figure. He is 70s Donald Trump.
I'm talking about, forget Trump. Where's Ryan? Where's McConnell to say, time out? This guy's going to come and go. But our government's going to be here when he's gone. And what kind of a precedent is this guy leaving that we are permitting?
Well, again, and to that point, the party is going to be here when he's gone, because the party always must be bigger than one person. And so it becomes very troublesome when you have individuals who are unwilling to call out even obvious conflicts of interest. It makes it very difficult. Having said that, I think, again, it speaks to this broader deepening of tribalism, which is really, in many ways, eroding the connective fiber of society. And if we can't just get back to the point where, as humans, as Americans, we can't just call balls and strikes and say, I love your tax policy, but, I think what you're doing is wrong.
And finally, Andrew, all those cabinet members I listed, and there's more that we didn't have time for, does the buck stop with each of them for their own actions, or in some ways, does it start from the top?
Well, you could certainly make the argument that they're following the example that Trump set, but when push comes to shove, it's going to be their heads on the chopping blocks. Trump's not going to give them any quarter and say,
the only reason I
set
think they're
this
getting
example.
a hard time is because they're given bad press here, and the president doesn't like to share the news
Unless
cycle.
they're good on TV.
Unless they're good on TV. All right, coming up next. The president, Joe talked about the media here, and he's ratcheting up his attacks against Amazon and the aforementioned fourth estate. We're going to take a look at why this is not normal and also not okay, and it could make a bad situation even worse come crisis.